Hey everybody, this is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another edition of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. Since it is officially April, we are entering quarter number 2 of 2023. That's hard to believe that we are in quarter 2 already, but we are entering the heart of what we consider our spring market, our busy time of year as realtors. And we want to make sure that you have the best opportunity to win that business when you're on your listing appointments this spring. So we're going to talk about our best listing presentation tips this episode. And we're going to do so with the help of two fantastic agents from the Lehigh Valley. Marissa Burkholder from the Marissa Burkholder team from our Allentown sales office, and Amy Wastler from the Amy Wastler team out of our Center Valley office. We're going to get into all things listing presentations today, so let's get right into it with Marissa and Amy, and we'll pick it up on the other side. I have two great agents, Marissa Burkholder from the Allentown office, and I have Amy Wastler from the Center Valley office. We want to give you some tips that you can use from two agents who have been there, done that, and do a lot of business in our footprint. So, Marissa, Amy, how are you today? Hope everything is going well on your end.
Doing great. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you.
All right. So in order to gather our best listing presentation tips for everyone, I want to start out from the very beginning of the process, and that is having the initial contact with a prospect or lead that is looking to sell their home. So my first question to the both of you is, how do you prefer to set up your listing appointment with the prospect or client? Do you reach out by phone initially? Do you respond by email? Do you try and set up a Zoom call real quick? And what questions are you asking to qualify that seller in advance to gather information about the home prior to your meeting? So, Marissa, we're going to start with you on this one. How do you best go about doing that?
Well, Jason, I feel time is of the essence. So as soon as you find out that a client or a possible new client will be wanting to have a listing appointment with you, I jump on the phone as soon as I can. I text them, I give them a call. And then if they want to do a Zoom call, I'll set up a Zoom call. I'll always send an email to remind them of every conversation that we have in the beginning. But I think the most important thing to do is once you find out that you have somebody hot looking to list their house is to make sure that you call them. Time is definitely of the essence. And you don't want to wait 24 hours. You don't want to wait 6. You want to pull over. You want to call them. And you want to set up either that Zoom call or that phone call when they have time to talk longer. Yeah, without a doubt. Time and speed is of the essence, as we always say in real estate. Amy, how about you?
Well, I'm not nearly as seasoned as Marissa. I'm really honored to be here with her today. What I will say is because I'm newer, I've probably made way more mistakes, and I'm still learning the hard way. I do think that it's really, really important to pick up your phone. You never know when somebody is going to call you. I have had instances where I've been referred by business contacts to other people, and I've missed the call. And by the time I call them back, they have already chosen their agent. It's amazing how that happens. So be responsive. I never, ever do a Zoom call. I want to see people. I will follow up with email, but I always connect in person by phone, even if I have to call them 3 times.
I got a call the other day from someone who was referred to me by a client of mine, and I'm driving down a busy highway, and I wanted to make sure that I call them right away so I can actually set up a phone call. So I phone called to set up a phone call because my process is get to them right away, like you had said, Marissa, and then follow up when you're good and ready. I have an opportunity to look up the property so I can speak intelligently about it. And I have a process. I actually have a worksheet that I got through Ninja Selling that you basically can just run down a list of questions to qualify that seller. I don't know if you both have, a follow-up question to that. Do you have a checklist or a system that you use to qualify that seller? Like, what kind of questions are you asking them? Do you have kind of a rundown that you do? So Amy, I'll start with you on this one. Do you have some questions in advance that you're going to be asking that lead?
Yes, I focus mostly on where they are in their process. It just helps me to really gauge what I need to prepare. I always want to know where they're going. If they're selling, I want to know if they have a plan. Also, I spend an enormous amount of time trying to find any connection I can to them personally. So I want to know who I know that they know, what they do that I do, and so that I can really start to develop rapport immediately, right on the phone.
Incredibly important. So, Marissa, how about you?
For me, I believe I probably use that same form that you use from ninja classes. I've modified it over the years based on if they're a current client with me that has already purchased a home and now they're getting ready to move up or move down or move away. I modified it a little bit to work with that customer. It's really important for me when I do call them to find out if they're going to be interviewing other agents. And the reason I say this is, in my experience, I found, just like Amy had said earlier, that if you wait too long, or in my case, if you're not the first agent, it seems like you trail behind the others. So I want to know if they're interviewing somebody else. And I encourage them to do that. And if they are, I say, are you doing us all on one day? If so, let me know what day that is. And I try to get the first slot. Or if they're like, well, we're just calling people, I try to get the next day. Because I want to be the first agent that goes in, because then everybody has to meet up or exceed what I've done. And I know I do my homework.
I think that's a really important point that you make, because all things being equal, I think the first agent in makes, if you do a good presentation, you make that memorable impression, right? And I feel like they almost give the first person in the benefit of the doubt. They feel you have their undivided attention. By the fourth agent in, they're kind of like, well, we've heard this before, where they're kind of getting kind of bored with the process. They just want to pick somebody. It's almost like when you have a listing, I feel like, in the first offer in usually gets remembered by the sellers. I feel like, all things being equal, I feel like they almost give the first offer in the benefit of the doubt a lot of times. And so I always try and be the first offer in. The same, I try to be the first agent into a listing as well. So that's a really good point. So, much is made about scheduling your appointment. We just talked about that. Now that you've actually scheduled the listing appointment with the seller, what are your go-to research tools and marketing pieces when you're putting everything together for that listing appointment? What programs do you use personally and put together to make a great listing presentation? So, Marissa, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, as I said earlier, I make sure that I do my homework. And the homework doesn't necessarily take that long, especially if you're doing a lot of it and you've prepared yourself for this as the standard for all of your listing presentations. So we have a lot of great resources that Berkshire Hathaway offers us through ACE. One of them is the AVM report. What I'm finding now, since the pandemic, I feel like a lot of the rates that they offer, or the prices, that the listing prices that they give a range for, has expanded. Now it's $100,000 range versus what was a $20,000 or $40,000 range. So bringing those tools in will alert the sellers that there's a lot of variables with the price, which is why we have to go back and massage. And this is where I do my second appointment too. So for me, I run 3 different reports, and I bring them all. And sometimes I'll show them all and sometimes I won't. But at the end of the day, what they really want to know is what price you're going to come up with. So I try to have some kind of preliminary price. So I run through the National Association of Realtors, I run the RPR report. Through ACE, I run the AVM report. And then also through ACE, we have Moxie now, which I understand is going away, but I've always used Moxie. I pulled up all of the comps, and I run a full photo report for all the active, all the sold in the last 6 months, as well as all the coming soon and under agreements. I want my clients to see, when I come into the listing presentation, that I know the market and I'm going to show them the market, but I'm also going to show them the pictures, because that really matters with that variable price and when they see those ranges. So I want them to know that we're doing our job, and our job just isn't plug in a number and that's what it is. But one other thing I use to show that as well is the test the market tool that's offered through Real Scout through ACE.
One of the things that I have discovered about myself is that I am super old school. So I do use Moxie, but I really prefer to do my own research. I don't want to see what any computer generation will give me as an example of value. I want to do it myself. And I think that comes from my first mentor. We worked at a very small brokerage, and he taught me everything I know about listing presentations, and we didn't have any fancy tools. So I'm also incredibly anxiety ridden about the appraisal process. I have some post-traumatic stress from the pandemic. And so I overanalyze everything by myself. And I look at every property in every way. I look at it hyperlocally. I look at it by school district. I look at it by county. I want to know exactly what has sold. I want to know exactly what kind of financing is popular there. I want to know what's on the market. I want to know condition. I want to know who has sold these homes. I'm really detailed about this. So when I go in, I might not have a ton of fancy materials, but what I do bring is proof that I have done every ounce of research.
Yeah, that's pretty detailed. I will tell you, I like to think of myself as a blend between the two of you. So my process is, Amy, I will do the research, maybe not to your extent, because, if you're going out to the county, I don't go that far typically. I mean, kudos to you for doing that, but I will do my detailed research first. And then Marissa, what I tend to do is I will look at the AVMs on a bunch of different portals, whether it's our own, whether it's Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, RPR, because I want to get a gauge of what the consumer is seeing out there in the marketplace, because I want to be able to combat their objection. Well, Zillow says my home is worth XYZ, right? So, and it also acts as, in my opinion, if I do my research, I come up with my price. If I blend all those AVMs together, it's not an answer to what the home is worth, but it can be a guide in certain ways, right? That I kind of know I'm on the right track with pricing. And so I kind of blend everything together. It's an art and a science, right? When you're pricing a home, it's always an art and a science. And there has to be some kind of eyeballing of everything. It's not just necessarily hard numbers. The last thing that I want to mention that I use in particular, and I don't know if either of one of you use this tool, but Agent Metrics, to me, the pricing analysis tool where you have the little dots on the graph, I find that to be my number one tool that I bring with me, because most people are visual learners. They want to see a chart. And I feel like that's the best representation that you can give someone. So if there's a cluster of houses that is sold around the 500,000 mark, and then you have outliers on either side, you can make the case is this is where your home should be. This is where it should be slotted in terms of pricing, because you have this cluster of houses here. And so it helps me to make my case when I'm out on a listing appointment. So there's different ways to go about a listing presentation, right? And depending on timing and where you're going to be, some people like to do a one step where you just go out once and you lay everything on the table. You go at it for an hour and a half with the seller. And other people like to do a two-step where you're sending something out in advance and then following up with more detail when you actually go out to the property. Do either one of you use, or I should ask, which one do you prefer to use for both of you? Amy, I'm going to start with you on this question.
I am definitely a two-stepper, and I don't drop off materials, although I think that is something I would like to consider. I actually will set the initial appointment to do the information gathering with the seller, and then I'll make another appointment to come back and meet with them in a couple of days so that I can present exactly what I want. I think the first appointment is really about rapport building. I have a good idea of what I'm thinking, but I want to meet them. I want to get a feel for their anxiety level. I want to know what they are hoping to sell their home for, which allows me to go back and really do my research and see if I can validate that. Definitely a two-stepper.
That's a great answer. Marissa, how about you?
So I also want to reiterate that I do all of that research. I just don't pull up AVM reports. I go on to the MLS the first time and I'm looking personally at all the photos. I'm looking at all the details. And in Moxie, there's an option that you can enter in your own MLS numbers. That's what I do. I don't necessarily just pick the ones that they offer. I enter them in. So it is a little bit more detailed than just, digital reports. But I bring that to the first meeting. And then the second meeting, I always tell them that I want to massage that number because I don't know what their house looks like inside. I don't know how much work we have to do inside. I don't know how much we can push the price of the listing based on what they're willing to do, work-wise, staging-wise, presentation-wise, whatever, or what they have planned. Are they finishing up a kitchen? Are they, repainting all the house? All that's going to base on my price. So it's very important to go for a second meeting, in my opinion, even if you're going for a first meeting with somebody that you've already sold the house to. You don't know what you're going to even compare it to until you've walked in, which is why I also like to bring all the pictures, or if you're sending the Moxie ones, you can digitize that and they could see the pictures for their own purpose. There's also a option on NARPR that if they need a new roof, you can make a variable for that. If they have a new roof, you can give them a credit for that. So there is that flex opportunity that you can use the NARPR report and massage those numbers to come back to something a little bit more realistic. And then depending on when they're going to sell, the market changes and shifts, as we know. So if they're doing all this preliminary work and they're not coming to sell it until 3 to 6 months, prices are going to look totally different.
For sure. And yeah, I think that RPR tool is great where you can make those adjustments like that. I've done that in the past. It's a great evidentiary tool too. Like when you go out, it kind of has some clout behind it where, it would mean something to a seller. Like, we're going to make this adjustment. I'm using this program, and based on this program, this is where you should be. Also, I do want to mention, I do the two-step as well, because as you both are finding out right now, I have a tendency to talk a lot. And when I go out to a listing appointment and it's a one-step appointment, I find myself, as much as I try and pare it down, Amy, you had mentioned trying to build rapport, right? It's such an important part of what we do. So I don't want to shortchange our meeting either. And I don't want to stay there for, say, a half an hour, because in that half an hour that I would have, I want to build that rapport. So I want to potentially split it up into 2 meetings, give some information in advance, and then I give the bulk of what I'm going to do the second time that we meet. But you both are so correct in what you're saying here. I think it's best practices to try and give them some information, follow up with more information. And Marissa, like you said, pricing wise, it can certainly help to massage that price the second time and you're meeting in person and going through the house and actually seeing it, which brings me to actually my next question. Okay, you finally make it out to the property, and where do each of you like to start? Because we've had people on in the past that some will want to sit down first and build that rapport, then take a tour of the home to finish up. Other people like myself, I typically like to take a tour of the home first, build rapport as I'm going through, which is the primary strategy that I'm employing here. It's really to build rapport. It's not necessarily to see. I mean, I want to see the house, obviously, but it's to ask questions about them themselves more than anything else. So what's your process like once you're in the home? And Amy, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I think I do something very similar to what you do, but I think one of the things that is really important to note is that you really have to read the client. And it's okay to walk in and decide at that moment what is going to be best. I had recently a lovely lady who we wound up having a great visit, who honestly, I think she thought I was there to rob her. That was her impression. And it took me, I literally had to put my hands up and say, I'm just here to see you. There's no pressure, nothing to worry about. We're just going to have, I'm just here to see what you need. And it took her a minute to really decompress. So yes, I want to do a tour, but sometimes I have to stand in the entryway for a few minutes just to let the client absorb me into their space and invite me in. I think it's really important that when we are on a tour, we are looking for the positives. Nobody wants to hear all of their things that they have to do to correct their home. Mm-hmm. You are a guest. You are lucky to be there, and they should feel that from you. So that I would say I do typically ask for a tour if they don't offer me one, and then we will sit down after.
Okay. That's what I do. Like you had said, that's typically how I go about it. Marissa, how about you? Do you do anything different, or do you kind of follow the same path?
I feel that there's not a best way, worst way situation here. I really leave it up to my host. So when I'm coming into their house, much like Amy, I'm coming into their territory, and I try to read them. And I'm not my first rodeo, so I've done this a couple times. You're going to find that the people that have a little bit more high level anxiety and analytical type people, they're going to want to sit down first, and they're going to want to show you what they have. They've usually composed some things they prepared for the meeting. Or you're going to find the host that wants to show you the house. They're really proud of the house and they want to give you the tour. I just let them kind of take the reins. And I even ask them typically when I come in, I greet them. I say hello. I introduce my name. I give them my card. I usually have a bag and a coat. And, one of the things I say is, where do you want me to put this? And how would you like to start? And then we get going from that direction.
You know what's funny about this whole thing? So I'm friendly with another agent in the Lehigh Valley, and she told me, I don't want to give away her secret sauce here, but she said something interesting to me that said, you let the person decide where they want to start and then do the complete opposite, because it shows that you're in control of the listing appointment, which I find interesting. I don't know if I would do that, but it is a strategy. And so it does have a psychological effect on everything if you think about it. You do it politely, but obviously, if they want to start with a tour, then maybe you say, I'd like to sit down first. Or if they want to start sitting down first, you maybe ask for a tour. So everybody has their own process. And I found that to be very interesting to think about when you actually go out. And like you said, there's no right or wrong, right? This is not you have to do X, Y, Z. It's again, reading the client and kind of going along with what you think is best in that situation. So, we talked a little bit about rapport. I want to get into the nuts and bolts of actually, your listing presentation, right? So you often have one chance to make a good impression with your listing presentation and the seller, right? So what do you both do to make a seller say, wow, like I really need to hire this agent? What can agents do to give their presentation that wow factor in your mind and stand out from the competition? Marissa, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I like to do my homework, Jason. So one of the things I do is I come prepared. I come prepared with my tools, as I had mentioned, and I even go so far with those tools that if it has an option to put a photograph of their house, I either drive by their house and take one, or I get it through Google Earth and have a photo of a recent photo. And they're usually like, wow, how'd you get that picture of my house? Sometimes they're a little creeped out, but I think they feel like I've gone the extra mile and I really have done the homework and I know what house that is theirs. And also the fact that, I've done all that homework. When I go there, I can talk intelligently about the market. And that's something that they're hiring as an expert, and we have to prove to them, and that has to be a wow factor, is that we know what we do and we're an expert in our field. So if you know exactly what's going on in their neighborhood and you know what's going on in our community and with our prices of our home and our days on the market, and you keep yourself abreast to the interest rate situation and everything else, I think that's going to wow them because you can't expect them to know that. They want to know that they're hiring a professional.
Absolutely. Amy, do you want to add to that? Because I know, you talk about your attention to detail in your appointments. So do you want to add to what Marissa said?
I agree 100% with Marissa that we need to appear as educated as we can and be the expert. But what I feel really has set me apart in my listing presentations is my process. And I have a little team, and I'm very proud of them. We all have a role. And before I sit down with any seller, I have an exact plan of action because I know I've already set the tone for knowing when and where they're going. I'm able to actually sit down and create a calendar for them with steps, resources that they might need. I have the marketing plan ready. I have the complete system to present to them. And I do it for every single listing appointment. And I do it in a way that is customized to that client. We've talked as a team about creating resources that we can just hand to people, but there aren't any two transactions that are ever alike. And so finding a way that I can show that I have prepared something just for them, I think has been beneficial.
I think you bring up a really good point because I think for each of us, we have our core process, right? We kind of approach each listing appointment with a set of core items or things that we want to try and accomplish, but we tailor make it to each individual client. We may have to tweak this or tweak that. Like you said, Amy, every client is different. And so it's not going to be the same exact product every time, but maybe the core gist of what we're trying to do, whether it be explaining our marketing plan or, going over the process of how you get to that price. That may be the same, but each client is different. Every property is different, and you may have to tweak, things here and there. Since we're running out of time here, we talked about obviously the process before we go to the listing presentation or the listing appointment. We talked about the process during the listing appointment and what you do. But I want to talk now about the process when you leave the listing, because many agents out there will not follow up, right? They'll just wait to hear back, and they'll take a passive approach and think that their job is done once they have made that listing presentation. I want to ask the both of you, how do you personally follow up with a prospective client once you leave the property? And what can agents do to go that extra mile to win a listing after your listing presentation is done?
So as far as what I do for follow-up after I've met with the client, I'm doing the two-step process. I always send a thank you card out. That's, after I meet the person for the first time, I want to send them a thank you card. I usually even kind of pre-prep it before I leave. I have the envelope written, so I know when I go back to my desk that means I have to write that thank you card, and I try to get it in the mail that day because I think that's important that somebody sees that you do that. I also, when I leave the first meeting, I have the second meeting set up. And with that second meeting being set up, I send them an email. After I send them the thank you card, I send them an email. I outline exactly when I'm going to come. I tell them when I'm going to call them again next. And I try to do that second meeting within that same week if possible, if not the very next week. I don't like to wait long with that. And when I come to that second meeting, I usually have a little sweet treat for them. Josh Early is kind of my friend, so I bring him a little bit of those nonpareils. Everybody likes that. And then following up from the second meeting, I tell them when I'm going to call, and I make sure that I call. And then if I don't get them to respond, I call them the next day, and I tell them always at the call or on the message when I'm going to call them again next.
That's great. So, Amy, do you want to add anything to that? How do you feel about following up after you're done?
I think it depends on the time frame of the seller. If we are going to be working rapidly, I am going to be calling them every couple of days because we are already deep into the process. We have work to do. If it is somebody who is on a longer path, for instance, I have some clients who are building new construction, right? And we know we're not going to sell until their new construction is finished. I always try to call at least once every couple of weeks just to say hello, see if anything is happening or, if they need anything from me, if I can provide any resources. I am a caller and I try to find, I try to have a reason to call, not just, hey, how are you doing today? Also, I will call and follow up if there are other homes similar to theirs that are on the market or I know are going on the market, just to give them an idea what is happening currently while they're waiting in that time period where it's just unstructured. But I think anytime we can get voice to voice with somebody, it's important.
And I do believe that there's a shelf life, right? After a closing, you want to always ask for a review right after closing, right? Same thing goes, I feel like, for a listing appointment. I know for me personally, I'll immediately go home after I have that listing appointment, write a handwritten note and get that in the mail as quickly as possible. The other thing that I've started doing is, if you've listened to the podcast, I'm a big proponent of BombBomb video recording. I will record a video and send that to them, thanking them for their time and asking, if they have any questions, please feel free to follow up with me, kind of thing, right? And thank you for the opportunity. Send that out through an email, right? So record a video. And I just want to make sure, and Amy, you talk about phone calls, which I think are vitally important. I think that we have to kind of time it a little bit and kind of use our I see. I see Amy's hand up. She wants to add something. I'll just say this real quick. I follow up with a phone call, usually a few days after that. I want to let it breathe a little bit, and then I will follow up, shortly after that, but not too long. So, Amy, I'm sorry. What did you want to add to that?
You're going to appreciate this, and this is real life. I set up 3 roadblocks in my house so that nobody could get to me. I'm talking gates, doors closed. And still somebody's head just peeked through the door. So I actually had my hand up to wave my husband away. So I apologize for that. Cannot make this stuff up.
Well, I told the both of you that before we started, the professional podcaster that I am, I have animals that are always running around here. And I told you, I try and box them out as much as possible, but it is almost impossible. And no harm, no foul on that one. All right. So, all right. So last question, because I know we have to get out of here. What's one sound piece of advice you would impart to a young agent going on their first listing appointment tomorrow? Marissa, I'm going to start with you.
All right. I'm going to say, come prepared. They're hiring a professional. You need to play the part of the professional. It's not a reason to get stressed out, because if you are doing all the homework and you're prepared and you understand what you're going into, you're going to be a pro. And make sure that you're the first one that gets in that door.
That's great advice. And have that confidence, like Marissa said. Sometimes we got to go in there, put our big boy or big girl pants on and do that Superman pose before we get out there, and have the confidence to just get out there and do it. Amy, do you want to add to that? What would you impart in your wisdom about going on a listing appointment?
I think that I was really fortunate to have the mentors that I did during the very beginning of my career. And honestly, I still rely heavily on amazing seasoned agents at Fox Roach like Lisa Wright to help me hone my craft. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I need support. So as recently as yesterday, one of my agents who's newer had a listing appointment. And so I went with her and we prepared together. And I did most of the talking, and she talked when she was comfortable. So if you have someone in your life, your mentor, another seasoned agent that you trust, it's okay to ask for support. You don't have to go in by yourself. You can take someone for third-party credibility, and it can go very well. So that's my advice. Don't feel like you have to go it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of working with agents, right? In our own office that we become friendly with, or you both are team leaders. Having that resource at your disposal is invaluable as a young agent. So take advantage of the people around you. All right, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank both of you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Much continued success to the both of you in your careers in the Lehigh Valley. And I hope to meet you both one day soon face to face and have the opportunity to follow up and discuss the market with the both of you. So thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, Marissa. Great to talk to you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
That was the conversation with Marissa and Amy. I thank them for their time. Here are a few takeaways that I had from our episode this week. Number one, Marissa and Amy both have a process that they follow when they get ready for any listing appointment. And that process starts from the initial conversation that they have with the client to set up the listing appointment, all the way to the point where the listing appointment is done, and now how are you going to follow up? They have a system, and that system allows them the best opportunity to have success when they go out to these properties. My mindset and my process is to always think like a lawyer. I have that mantra in my mind when it comes to a listing presentation. And what I mean by thinking like a lawyer is I want to build a case as to why the seller should hire me instead of another real estate agent to list their property. Am I building my case correctly? Am I doing the research? Am I putting the time in to show them exactly how I'm going to differentiate myself in terms of my marketing, my pricing strategy, my photos, my staging? All these things build my case as to why a seller should use me instead of somebody else. And I think that if we go in with that mindset, more often than not, it will help us win the listing and win consistently. Number two, very simply, people do business with people that they know, like, and trust. So if point number one was having a process, being systematic, doing the research, knowing the market, make sure that you are professional when you go out there, that is part of them learning to trust you. But they also need to know you a little bit and like you a little bit, right? So number two is building rapport with your client. When you are on the phone with a potential client, when you are out at a property with a potential client, always look for common ground, right? What do you have in common? What can you lean into with that potential client and have a conversation outside of real estate for a little while? That really helps to solidify the bond between you and a seller. And if you get to know each other a little bit better, that will certainly help your chances of winning out on a listing. And number three, following up once you leave your listing appointment. How are you following up with that client? Are you sending a handwritten note as soon as you leave that listing presentation? Are you following up with a short video that you can send the client thanking them for allowing you to tour their home? Are you following up with a phone call a few days later? This will drive home the point in a seller's mind that you are the professional, you have the attention to detail, and you have the want, right? You really want to work with this person. You want this listing. That will go a long way to help your cause. Well, that's it for the podcast this week. We will be back in another couple of weeks with a new topic, a new guest. And as always, if you want to hear about a topic that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the podcast or left us a review, please do so. It helps us to reach more people. Once again, this is Jason Ostrowski for the Everything Real Estate Podcast saying, stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.